Welcome to KnotWork Myth and Storytelling. This is the show where ancestral wisdom meets the modern imagination. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Gowdy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, and a writing coach. I'm the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic, and the founder of the Writer's Knot and Author's Knot communities. On KnotWork, we explore the mythology and folklore of Ireland and beyond. Whether you're drawn to Celtic culture and the power of the landscape, or whether you just like a good story and expansive conversation, you're in the right place. Fulcha. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you become a paid subscriber to my Myth is Medicine newsletter over on Substack. Look for the link at the top of the show notes or visit mythismedicine.substack.com. Before we explore this week's story, I have a question for you. What about your stories? Whether it's a book project that wants to be birthed, deep, authentic writing to support your business, or a personal creative project you can't quite name yet, I'm here to support you through the entire writing process, from the initial ideation stage to the crafting of narrative and beyond. If you're ready to write memoir, or a chronicle of the spiritual journey, or a book that explores healing, nature, and the power of imagination, as well as the toughest truths of today, call on me. I walk beside you as you uncover the story that only you can tell. I'm a confidant who supports you through the challenges, and I'm your champion who will offer the nudges you need to get the words on the page. And yes, we hold space for the mythical and the magical all along the way. Visit my website, marisagowdy.com, to learn more about my writing coaching services and set up a free 30-minute consultation. Season 6, Episode 12. The Wooing of Etain, told by Amanda Verdery. Our guest, Amanda Verdery, is a writer, certified shamanic practitioner, an initiated medicine woman in her Celtic ancestral traditions. A second-generation Scottish American with Irish, English, and French ancestry, most of her learning hails from the Scottish and Irish mythic and mystical paths. She is devoted to helping women in particular remember and embody their dawn, their soul's gift and calling. In 2022, she founded the Wild Becoming Sanctuary, a modern mystery school guiding deep and holy women of all kinds into communion with their power and capacity for self-healing. She also offers one-to-one guidance for those undergoing a holy rite of passage in their lives in her Wild Becoming immersion. All of her work is led by the path of the goddess and the circle wisdom of the wheel of the year. The story you'll hear is a delightful one, and the conversation we have is a delicious one. And I wanted to make sure that you remember that on Sunday, May 4th, I'll be holding the next Myth Workers Salon for all of my paid Substack subscribers. During this conversation, Amanda really invites our listeners, that's you, to consider the ideas that we talk about, that we explore. And I wanted to remind you that the Myth Workers Salon is the place where KnotWork listeners and Myth is Medicine readers can come together to dive deep, to discuss the way that these mythic themes influence our lives, and to really understand our place within this gorgeous, more than human world of ours. I hope you'll join us. But now, it's time for a story and conversation. Well, I am so excited to welcome Amanda here to the podcast today. And as is our way on KnotWork Myth and Storytelling, we first ask the story to speak for itself, and then we'll explore all the ways that it resonates and matters to us in this moment. So Amanda, welcome. Fulcha. I'm so glad you're here. Will you tell us a story?
I sure will. Thank you so much for having me. And today I share with you the legend of the wooing of Etain. Fado, and a very long time ago, happening in a nearby forest as we speak, there lived the Green Lord of the Woods, son of the king of the Tuatha De Danann, the Fae people who once walked the earth, shimmering and glimmering amongst the flora and fauna of those times, which may yet be these times. This king of the forest was named Midir, And one day, while tending the creatures of the forest, he heard a gentle chant moving through the misty trees. And then he saw the most stunning maiden before him, humming her incantations, and instantly fell irrevocably in love with the fairy queen, Etain, a daughter of the land herself and the most beautiful creature he'd ever beheld. Upon glimpsing Midir, she too fell deeply and easily in love on account of a mysterious intimacy whose feeling made all things well in her heart, fluid like water, obvious and natural. But as it happened, Midir was already married to the great sorceress Fuemnach, an arranged marriage which suited neither much but compelled them to each other. Nevertheless, Fuemnach was enraged beyond all reason to have her husband taken from her by this hussy called Etain. And so she turned Etain instantly into a pool of water. But even in this form, Midir loved her. Some say even more, for her soft mirroring of his very longing to be seen by her was so profound that all day he spent by the pool of Etain. And this further infuriated Fuemnach, who by now was beginning to take on the old age of bitter and the lunacy of the forsaken, her hair a torrent of silver wires, her skin wrinkling into caves in which ogres slept. And so from her seat of crazed jealousy, she turned Etain into a fly, a lowly, annoying fly. Surely such a excrement-eating nothing would not appeal to Midir. But of all the flies that ever were, none shimmered with such iridescence, none buzzed with such melody as the fly queen Etain. Midir kept her always near and spoke to her softly his poetry of devotion. And such was the power of this unbelievable stupidity that Fuemnach raised a curse that surprised even her. She raised a mighty wind, a 1,000-year wind, a wind of obliteration. As she did, she turned Etain into a butterfly, and thus she was blown far, far from Midir, never to be heard or seen from again. And Midir returned to Fuemnach, who stood smug and resplendent with triumph at the doorway of their hut. He kneeled before her and offered her his deepest regrets, then told her that he would be leaving that very night to wander the world searching for Etain. And so it was that he wandered long, for centuries. And along the way, though his loneliness grew as the years passed, so did his wild knowing, his sharp navigational skill, his ability to track large beasts, his warrior dance, and above all, his devotion to Etain. As it happened around this time, which is nearly 1,000 years later, Midir's good friend and brother Angus caught sight of a beautiful butterfly flitting around his camp. He found the little beauty gingerly swaying in the tall grasses of the bordering meadow and recognized her immediately. For this was no ordinary butterfly. This was the fairy queen Etain herself. He spoke with her at length about her 1,000-year journey across and through and under and deep down and betwixt and between every corner of the earth's many worlds upon worlds. He promised to get word to Midir, and in the meantime built her a beautiful tiny home in which to live, which she could easily fly in and out of, but also be protected by the vengeful wind that hunted her. But news travels fast to those with their ears to the ground, and Fuemnach had spent 1,000 years employing all kinds of masters of meddling, scouring alleys abroad for evidence of Etain. And at the exact moment that Midir's falcon landed on his arm and whispered that Etain had been found by Angus, one of Fuemnach's spies whispered the same in her ear. So she blew up the wind again, that old witch. And try as he might, Angus could not keep Etain in the small wooden sanctuary, and she flew clear into the sky. But Midir was determined. His heart reawakened, and he set off in the direction she'd last been seen. As it turned out, Etain too had some power now. Being that one who has blown about for 1,000 years and yet survives is no dummy. And so when she saw a castle yonder, she slipped into the current of wind heading that way and hid under a great oaken table where sat the king and queen of humans. Sensing the wind that blew in the castle windows was a vengeful wind, the people closed the windows up, and at long last, for another 12 years had passed since being flung from Angus's protection, she took a long and easy breath. But she knew that it would not be long before Fuamnach found her again. It would not be long before she destroyed her once and for all. And at that moment, Etain felt flooded with all the grief stored in her essence for 1,012 years. She wept for her own exhaustion. She cried and cried for her courage and yet her seeming failure. Above all, she cried for her beloved, Midir. And it was then, in the torrent of her profound and understandable grief and most honest, heartfelt longing, that she chose to invoke the old magic. A magic so mysterious, no one can ever know how or if it will work. A magic so long forgotten that it cannot be remembered alone, hiding under a table. A magic so ancient that if you performed it now yourself, you would immediately become an ancestor. She fluttered up to the queen's cup of wine, and with one last glance around, she dove in headfirst. Some say she drowned herself. Others say a final gust of Fuamnach's wind pushed her in. Others claim she became the wine. Either way, and in all those ways, exactly 9 months later, the queen birthed a baby girl, her first child, and named her Etain. And Etain grew up to be the fairest maiden in all the land, and before long, the king of the bordering land, Oha, caught sight of her and felt she'd make a fine wife. The Princess Etain was married to him before she could even take in what was happening. Raised to be a lady, she performed her royal duties with grace, but always and whenever she could, she wandered in the enchanted forest, said to still be haunted by the fae folk of old. She was enamored with these old tales, fairy tales, as the village storytellers called them. She would wander and wander in those woods, and the people said she had some unresolved sorrow in her heart. The king Oha tried to fill her longing with glittering things, but all that soothed her was her wanderings, and so he obliged her time in the woods, so long as she returned dutifully to their bed each night and continued to conduct herself graciously in court. Meanwhile, Midir, who had resolved to take on the austere life of a hermetical shaman and was living high in a mountain cave, sat in utter silence, awaiting news on the wind with whom he'd made an alliance. Suddenly he caught her scent, and down the mountain he went. And this time, Fuamnach heard nothing, for the fairy queen on whom the spell had been cast lived no more. Midir found the enchanted wood and recognized Etain. He could see immediately she had no memory of who she'd once been. He tracked her for many days, knowing he must be both tender and ambitious in wooing her anew. And it's true that Etain began to sense something watching her. Was it crow? Was it river song? Was it the tall pine's shadow? Finally, one warm afternoon, Midir stepped out from behind a tree. Etain made to scream, but Midir shook his head and put a finger to his mouth, encouraging silence. And compelled by she knew not what, she remained so. Without a word, they circled and spied each other. A dance so slow, so heart-pounding, so arousing, that Etain knew instantly she was in the greatest danger she ever could have hoped for. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it was as if this strange and beautiful man was a part of why she had been wandering all these years. But she dared not speak such things. And without having said a single word, they danced away from each other, and in the dappled light of approaching dusk, Midir deep into the shadows of the wood, and Etain back to the castle. For the next 3 days, she could not bring herself to return. Her mind was torn asunder with fear and distrust of this one who stalked her. But her heart was resplendent. She knew that she must be in love, and for the first time. She tried to avoid the forest, but after 3 days, nothing could be done. She told herself she didn't care whether she saw him again or not, but of course there was no greater longing to spy him again than that of Midir himself. And he appeared again, and this time he had a butterfly on his shoulder and asked if he might be permitted to tell her a story. And he told her a story that touched her heart about a fairy queen turned into a butterfly. And the next day was the same, except he took her to visit a lowly fly and told her another tale, which resonated in her so deeply she thought she would cry. And day by day, and story by story, he remembered her back through all the epochs. And finally, Midir took Etain to a pool of water and told her the story of their love back to the beginning. And then he bid her to lean over and look into the pool as he had done himself 1,000 years before. And when she looked in, she saw that she was indeed the fairy queen Etain. And she remembered, after a millennia of dismemberment and detour, all of which had grown her into a wise woman, able to invoke the oldest magic. And thus, Midir and Etain were reunited in deepest love. It is said that no love has been made could rival the ecstasy brought into each other and therefore the world. But there's more to this tale, as you no doubt can guess. For not far from the enchanted wood, a certain king was getting wind of some wild forest god roaming the land. Whispers they were, but the king rallied his warrior chieftains and called in his fighting men, preparing outwardly to greet the noble rogue and his entourage with great hospitality, while secretly being at the ready for war. To be continued.
Oh, all the best romances have a sequel, right? Thank you for
Yes.
landing us on a cliffhanger. Oh, and thank you for this story of time and memory and the elements. And again, of romance and allowing a love story to bloom and blossom, which here we are at Bealtaine at time. It's just such the perfect moment for this tale. So thank you so much for calling us in, blowing us about, taking us on this journey.
Yes, this story is really close to my heart and I think very, very important right now, actually, and certainly here at Bealtaine and also more broadly, I think. So yes, thank you. I'd love to tell it.
Oh, well, there's so much just contained in what you said, but give us the first thread. What's the first, or maybe it's, picking up the first pebble on the trail when we knew it was a moment for you to come on to KnotWork. Why this story? Why did you know it needed to be spoken?
Well, for me, like at its core, it's a story about initiation. It's a story about finding out who we are, often first through some kind of dismemberment, some kind of rupture. And from there, wandering, becoming wanderers, being blown about for a long time. And I want to speak specifically to women's initiation and the ways that we kind of get blown from what we love, from what we want, from what really speaks to us. And at the same time, the necessity during an initiation of kind of being blown from ourselves and kind of being like turned into this, that, and the other thing on our way to remembering who it is we actually are. And then this letting go of the old self, this very powerful part in the story, which in some versions, it's like I wanted to empower Etain. I felt her speaking to me about the power of a choice, which is a really big theme for women right now, right? Once again, as ever. And this idea that she planted in me, like, no, no, no. And what I know about initiation as being a guide to women in rites of passage, and generally this initiation we're all in, is this moment where we can choose and must choose to die to the old self or kind of keep suffering with the way it is. And then this thing about being found by this idea that Rumi said, what you're seeking is seeking you. What you long for longs for you. And of course, Midir is also going through his own initiation. And so I think, that's the first seed for me is initiation. Mm-hmm.
And contained within that is really that dance between the individual, the sovereign, and then also the union and that sense of
Yeah,
being part of something bigger than oneself. And in this case, it really is that dyad of their relationship. But I really love the way this story gives us permission to be both with this sense of each of them on their own
right.
individual initiatory journeys. And also, it's in service to coming back together. And their love endures, one would presume, beyond its 1012 years in many ways because of the challenges of coming together. If it had just been that first wooing, would it have been this great, great love story?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this truth around which, as a very independent woman, I find really has been helpful to me is like we each have our own path and we have to walk those paths. And then there's also this incredible romance here around being devoted, really. And that's such an important thing in the spring. We can get really caught up in all the things we have to do and this sort of like goals and strategy and discipline. But for me, and of course for the Celts, Bealtaine is, it's romance. Romance is pollination and, longing. And that's what causes us to be most devoted is to be really focused on what it is that we love and reuniting with that and staying close to that, staying close to what we love. And in that sense, I would say that there's this aspect of the conditioned self. You might even say that Femnach is this, she's sort of a victim of the status quo and of what you're supposed to do and what the arranged marriage and all this kind of thing and how those parts of ourselves can really blow us off course, sort of
Mhm.
self-cursing that can happen. I think of like the inner critic as one possibility for how you might look at Fenmark in this story.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, where you mentioned like the power of wandering and the search for self. And what actually was occurring to me as you said that is it's interesting how we actually try to do so much of our wandering within the straight lines of modern life, really in
Mhm,
terms of the programming you just sort of mentioned for Fumnach, is that we really, we look at mythologies for so many reasons, and some of them are that
mm,
psychological sense of saying, oh,
mhm,
yes, every aspect of this story is us
mhm.
and in us. And we also looked for the stories for the deeper connection to earth. But for now, as we
Yeah.
focus on the
Mhm,
psychological pieces, it's that sense that we wish to do our wandering within some fairly safe confines, particularly once we're perhaps past our, mid 20s when everyone says, "Oh, right, you're allowed to have
oh,
your
yeah.
junior year abroad and then your gap year." And then that seems in certain ways like halcyon days that maybe we got to have in our youth, because I know 20s is slightly different in the 2020s. But
Mhm,
just the ways in which even our wandering feels
mhm.
rather prescripted within
Yeah.
so much of the obligations that we're meant to do. Because of course, here
Yeah.
we are in America for
Mhm.
for Bealtaine time, spring awakening is tax time. At the same
Yeah.
time, just the
Yeah.
the ironies of modern life and all of its restriction and regulation that we're always trying to work through.
Yeah, I think that's really compelling because how do we allow an alchemizing sort of initiatory passage in our lives to happen while we keep our feet here in the middle world, having to do the things that we need to do, some of them coming from a really ailing culture, and some of them just the stuff of life, of survival, and the need of that. But we have a saying in some of the circles I roll in, which is to let the mystery have its way with you. And I think that when you were speaking, that's what I really heard. Etain is in this place where it's like the mystery is having its way with her, and turning her, and she's being turned into this and she's being turned into that. And so is another aspect of Fwemnock is that she's an initiator. I mean, she's an initiating force. She is that force which says, you're not going to get through this the same way you got through other stuff. Like like the time for change is upon you. And it's going to change you, and you're going to be changed by this, and your form is going to change, and I kind of have such like a special place in my heart for Fwemnock, and both, like you said, as an aspect of my own psyche that needs love and care and a little bit of rehabilitation, and also as a wild sort of old mother of the earth energy, initiating force, kind of sorceress hag energy that I find really yummy, actually.
Mm.
Mhm.
Well, and that came through, gosh, in just the ways that you offered how you would describe her, like the lunacy of the Forsaken. It was just, there's such poetry even in, she's the villain of this story in so many ways. And of course, you could write another version from her perspective that would say, and this is why. And then I thought I was going to be able to be with her forever, even though it was arranged and this and that. Like, you could, of course, write her story from her take, but giving, even as she plays her part in this particular romantic tale, that she is on the outside. She's the other part of the triangle
Yeah.
in a series of triangles that exist within this story. You
Mhm.
still offered her the gift of poetry. And I feel like sometimes it's at our peril that we forget that too, that ability to offer a rich description that says she is not
Mhm.
of this world and easy to hold.
Mhm.
She is not beautiful in the conventional sense,
Yeah.
but you really wrapped her in something noble. So I really appreciate
Yeah. Yeah. Well, imagine me sitting on a beach on a tiny island 30 miles out to sea doing a ceremony at a time when I was really working deeply with this story, and the wind was whipping like 40 miles an hour. This day-long ceremony I was enacting.
that.
And for whatever reason, although I had affection, I had like intellectual understanding of her, the truth of her and what she must have been through and what she must have been experiencing, it was like I was sitting in her wind, and I could feel her truth. I could feel her sacred rage at not just the Dean so much as the whole setup, being so deeply unfair
Mhm.
and flawed and problematic, and yeah, just was so moving for me. And so I had this very like visceral, out in the wind, out by the sea experience with this proverbial evil queen, right? And learning to just love her out there as an archetype within me, all that, And of course, this thing that happens between women, right? This old thing that I think we're really learning to heal,
Mhm.
you know?
And that stories like this allow us to I'll say confront, even it is and is not the perfect word for that in terms of like, oh right, and that's still here. That part of me is still here. That part of the story is still
Yeah.
here. We have, as perhaps we might want to imagine, that enough love and enough time erodes those old patterns that we know hold us back, and we're still grappling with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, you really highlight the elemental aspect of this story and the power of the wind. And I love that this story has such a placeness and a timeness for you, because I know you've told it in multiple ways, and the power of living with a story over time
Hmm.
is so important. And it's something that I know I can tend to forget as somebody who's putting story out into the universe on the regular as part of the work.
Yeah.
Please see previous comments about how sometimes it's hard to wander when we are trapped within the modern machine. It might
Yeah.
be my own
Yeah.
personal contemporary podcaster's dilemma. But that sense of hearing you talk about the ways in which you've been living with this story and it's been
Hmm.
blowing through you and with you, You've been offering it to others. I know that it would have come to you kind of on its own terms and then asked you how you wanted to be in relationship with it.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
part of that might you want to tell us a little bit more about?
That's so lovely. As you know, that's why you created this space for all of us. We thank you, is that stories are medicine. And so this story came to me at a time in my life when I was really seeking my soul's true name, if you might put it that way, or as the Irish say, my Don.
Mhm.
And I actually go by the medicine name Love Story, which came about in part in my work with this story, but many other aspects, constellating, swirling together. And I think what was really compelling to me then and now is this thing of longing and being compelled to move towards that which we most love and that which seems to most love us, that's what a calling is, that in fact the world runs on romance. And I feel like that's what I want to speak up for a little bit here today, is that romance gets a really bad rap. And yet it makes the world go round, doesn't it? It brings forth, desire, attraction brings forth all life. And so for me, romance is not only powerful, but it's deeply feminine. I find it to be a feminine, not like in a conventional way of soft and pink and fluffy, but deep and emotional and mysterious and likely to take you into the unknown and likely to dismember you and take you apart and take you into sort of the womb tomb. So my feeling is that the way to kind of be with these times in our lives, or this wandering, as you say, amidst daily life, is to really stay very connected to what we love. It's like this totally simple kind of adage, like do what you love, but it's really true. How connected are we to what we love? How loved do we feel by what we love? Do we know that whatever we're so wanting actually wants us too? Isn't that true love when it's just so mutual? And I think true love is actually a huge threat to the patriarchy and to dominator culture. Because really what it is it's a metaphor, or a living metaphor, for unity consciousness, right? And the power of the two becoming one, the power of men and women certainly, but really any of us being deeply connected and committed and loyal to each other. Deeply connected and committed and loyal to our done, to our soul's calling. And yeah, that's challenging in the modern setup we have, which has piled on all these to-dos that try to really bury that. But if we can just sort of say, romance first. Romance. Can I put romance first today? And this can be with the more than human world. This can be with our internal, the Youngs called our animus, or this can be with our beloved human beloveds.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm curious what you think about that, about romance, because I don't really see this as the damsel in distress Disney story. I see this as deep loyalty to one's longing and one's destiny, and a man as an ally, among other things. But yeah.
You gave space within the story for the sense of that courtship ritual when he returns. Like it is a little stalkery. Like there's a
Yeah.
predatory nature to that,
Hmm.
which, and in this contemporary moment when we're living with this idea of trigger warnings, with all these ways in which we
Yeah.
recognize we have not been careful enough with the
Hmm.
human heart, with the human mind, certainly with the human body, with the body of the more than human world. But,
Hmm.
knowing that we're in this moment because we have not honored that which is fragile.
Hmm.
And yet at the same time, I think in the process, we've also lost track of that which is strong and enduring and so powerful. And so, I want to find the phrase that you used because I wrote down so much as you were reading. Here it is. That dance that they were in together when they came back, as one, and their first, she doesn't remember him, but he knows her so well. The greatest danger she could hope for. And
Hmm.
I think is such a gorgeous and important way to name what we know love is, what we know first love is, or enduring love. I have a 15-year-old girl right now, and I'm watching her at the cusp and at the cusp and staying very consciously at the cusp. She does not want to cross through that threshold yet. And I
Yeah.
think there's a sense within her that perhaps knows, because she is a wise child and always has been, that love is the greatest danger she could ever hope for. And
Yeah.
that it
Mhm. Mm.
both imperils and creates one's sense of self. Because I can remember so vividly, I mean, being in Ireland when I was 20 years old for my junior year and having fallen hopelessly and foolishly in love with a very inappropriate man. And then he
Mhm.
broke my heart into 100,000 little pieces. And there are spaces like I was sitting at the top of Knocknarea, where, Maeve is meant to be buried in County Sligo. And I had my journal and I wrote about him. And I look back and I'm like, I was not having great sovereignty queen thoughts. I was
No.
mooning over a lost love and a broken heart. And
Yeah.
that's a
Mhm.
danger. And also
Mhm.
here I am 25 years later, able to laugh over it and know that it made me in other ways and all of the ways these stories
Yeah.
create us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a tricky line. I'm always asking myself, does Aideen want to be stronger? Does she want to be, like, how do I? And there's a part of me here where it's like, Midir he's a trickster a little bit himself, and he's a pirate. And there's this truth where it's like, if not for him and his love for her, she wouldn't have gotten in all that trouble in the first, like, thanks so much, right? Thanks, but no thanks.
Mhm.
And really having our wits about us as women, and really the difficult process, I think, of breaking from the Disney fairy tale love story is crucial work for women at this
Mhm.
time. We're learning to decenter men, actually. And so there's this aspect of the story that's still edgy for me because it centers men in a sense, still, or like there's this, which is why I often prefer to think of Meter as sort of her calling, not as a man, but as a metaphor for like that
Mhm.
which we most love and feel drawn to and want to be with and want to engage with. That doesn't always have to be, and often isn't. I would say our callings are never another person, in fact.
And it's at our peril and our foolish youth that sometimes
Right.
causes us
It's
to confuse it. And
right.
then we never keep moving with what
Yes.
romance is, as you're naming
That's exactly, which is that it's an alchemizer. It's an initiator.
it.
It alchemizes us, right? It alchemizes whatever is wanting to be turned into gold within us, for better or worse, right? Through heartbreak and through heartfulness. So,
Mhm.
but there's something about his name, Meter. And if you think, and it almost sounds like meet her.
Mm.
And it's like this thing where he's willing to meet her where she is. He's willing to find her, to search and seek. And I think that's something that the best of men know how to do, to listen.
Mhm.
Women need to be heard and listened to. We need allies right now in men. We
Mhm.
need to be met from a place of humility in men where they can realize that it's not about attacking them, but it's about understanding that we are truly living in a vile moment in terms of the domination of women globally. And so, how can men find their inner meter, and how can women find their inner meter and meet ourselves with our own inner masculine, our own inner sacred masculine, that inner beloved that we get to become the primary love affair of our own life. We are, each of us, our own love affair, right? I
Mm.
am my greatest lover. And from there, I make a much better lover, you know, with
Right.
boundaries, But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for touching on all that because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done still, like you said. And there's also a lot of goodness in romance.
Well, as you say, kind of inherent within that is if we could allow for love to come first, for loyalty and romance and all the ways in which, I keep seeing the cloud ring in front of in front of my eyes, right? We know that is that symbol from Galway, from just outside the city of
Mhm,
friendship, loyalty, and love. It's the hands, it's the
mhm,
heart, it's the crown. And in certain ways that's become sort of a little cultural, almost cliche, but when we can like break it down and slow it down and be with that and say, well, what else is it that we really want? What if it's okay that it is a trinity of symbols and a trinity of ideas?
Mm.
But, inherent in that idea, as you're saying, of putting romance first and putting love first is ultimately that seems to be what we're talking about here in terms of the masculine developing respect and I'd say reverence for the
Mm-hmm.
feminine that says
That's right.
the feminine is the voice that says we could put the love before the work. We
Yeah.
could say that love and our
Mm-hmm.
connection here is in fact more important than putting food on the table or, even keeping the rain out. Because what is it
Mm.
which is actually going to transcend this
Mm-mm.
particular lifetime? A lifetime
That's
of a
right.
full belly, of course it matters. Yes, we want to be held together in body. And also, what about the soul? And regardless of exactly where we land on any spiritual spectrum of our beliefs, pretty sure that there's some sense of transcendence of being that's marked by love, even more than by, well, as they say, that nobody ever wants on their gravestone to say he never missed a day of work or whatever it is that seems to mark our current
Right.
cultural
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
understanding of what is a priority.
That's right. Yeah. That is absolutely beautifully said. And I myself, and I would invite like our, the listeners here to, it's interesting to track how romance is, this is what I see. It's first dismissed, then it's ridiculed, and then it's pathologized or straight out attacked.
Mhm.
And you actually see this in the story. First, when Knock is, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, this is ridiculous. And then it's this ridicule, I'll turn her into a fly. And then it's just full out attack. And then over here, you've got unbelievable wars, genocide. You've got incredibly draconian treatment of people right here in the 21st century. You've got, right? But we're going to dismiss romance as silly. It's powerful. It's very, very powerful. And what we love is our guide. That's our North Star. What we most love, what we feel most drawn to, where we feel like we belong, where we're looking in the window thinking, I don't know if I belong in, yes, that's where you belong. Where you most long to belong and are in that you're needed there and wanted there. So many of us are so nervous to say yes to what we most really want to be doing or involved with or have a play a role in. But it is time, right, for us to take up our sacred roles. And it's romance has a lot to do with it, I think. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, well, gosh, we've explored so much, but the thing that just keeps calling me in, and I want to make sure we spend a little time here, is the way in which Aideen was made into a puddle of water, the way she
Mm.
was made into an element, into
Mhm.
a mirror for Midir. And I just want to be with the mystery of that with you for a little while, because I think it's one of those things that we can tend to lose track of some of the shape shifting and the transformation and with our human minds to spend a little moment wondering why, what was really happening there? What was it like for her? What was it like for the water? Where have
Yeah.
you traveled with that idea?
I kind of want to ask you first, but
Mm.
yeah.
I think when I was writing down all my notes for this, it was that sense of really holding, I think I said this beginning, it's time and it's element and it's the elementals and it's memory. And what occurs to me too, the studies they've done around the memory of water, right? And have you heard about
Mhm.
this? I'm
Oh, yeah.
forgetting the Japanese scientist's name who did the work around this idea that, water holds resonances based
Mhm.
on sound, on place, on space over time. And what is it like for us to be in relationship with living waters, to recognize the fact that you could perhaps say one of our great romances here as sentient breathing beings on this planet is it's a romance with water, it's a romance with air, right?
Mhm.
But that sense of being in relationship with the waters that flow through us and the waters that flow and sustain us so perfectly.
Mm.
Because I think there's that sense as well as even though at one point she becomes the fly, an excrement eating nothing, Humnak still couldn't quite manage to make her something terrible. It
Yeah.
still was that sense of saying, we are still, may no longer have that beautiful face, but you are someone who Midir can have a relationship with because he will in fact see his own face in this water.
Mm.
And hatred does not exist in this story. It can't. It
Mm.
still keeps being life affirming.
Yeah.
So that's like 72 thoughts based on a puddle, but that's
I
why
loved it.
that's why we look at puddles, right?
Love you. I love you. It's so good. It's so good. I just had a feeling. I was like, I want to hear what's moving through you. It's good. No pun intended. But so listening though, that word essence really stands out for me. Without thinking too much, that's what I feel coming is like from you, is that this is the story also about the fact that this world can turn you into all kinds of things and take you all kinds of places that you don't want to go or never planned on. But if you know your essence, or just even if you don't, your essence can never be taken from you. And when I think of essence, I think of water. Water is the holder of the essence of all life on earth, right? She is the keeper of the essence of us all and has always been associated with water. And that's is why, my work is so focused on helping others to encounter and embody their own essence, because that's what has been so life-giving for me, is just that things are happening all the time. And in my life is not perfect. It's not easy per se. And yet in discovering that essence and hearing her name and now sharing her name, it's like that can never be taken from us. Who we are, who you are can never be taken from you. And, Midir knows that, right? There's something so primordial about the fact that that's what she's turned into first, too, that I hear in what you're saying. And yes, the elements, especially water and air, are really strong in this. And of course, wind is the element of spring. So, yeah, I don't know. That's also a bunch of thoughts, but
Yes. And that idea, of course, of like water itself is one of our greatest transformational forces, that we know it in its various states so intimately.
yeah.
I think we tend to forget, like, shape shifting happens all around us when you watch the ice in your cup
Yes.
melt,
Mm, yeah.
and when your tea becomes steam.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember what I was going to say before was this idea of the memory of who we are and who we have always been, and even maybe who we will yet be is contained in the water. And I love how you draw this deepening around her being turned into this pool of water. And then of course there's the wine too, right? So water transforms, water changes things. Absolutely. And that might be a wonderful invitation for all of us listening, or is to maybe submerge in water soon and see, what am I shape shifting into next? What might I be turning into here at this moment in my life? What kind of form or shape do I want to take next, or do I need to take next for this next part? In my training, the Celts love shape shifting, like all indigenous cultures. You find so much in the stories around shape shifting, and that's not some totally esoteric wizardry. It's actually really, really, really practical magic to work with elements, animals, nature beings, ways of being more broadly, by really imagining, or I mean, as a shamanic practitioner, I do this often, is really merging with and then becoming that one, and seeing, what is it to be frozen water? What is it to be flowing river water? What is it to be ocean? What is it to be a drop of rain? I love that. Mhm.
Well, Amanda, as we land our conversation, I just want to really sort of be in the sense that in this conversation about romance, we've also really managed to talk really deeply about the sense of constant change as well as enduring essence.
Mm.
And just the gorgeous paradox of that, and that knowing that we are at once being with both of those things as their own truths, as loyalty
Mhm.
and steadfastness, and also as transition, transformation, and movement. And that the way those two really fit together, well, I guess that's the recipe for long-term love, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Whether that's, anamkara friendship or whether that's, romance, romantic love or familial love. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking us
So
on this
beautiful.
journey. Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
we could go
So
on
lovely. We
forever.
could.
So
Oh
let's do
my
this
gosh.
again.
This story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. But
Yeah.
could you tell people a little bit more about where they can find you and how to follow in your footsteps and where you're leading next, what you're creating?
Yes, yes. So I tell stories every month and guide other world journeys and do deep work around helping women to, again, encounter and embody their dawn, their soul's gifts and power, their natural essence. And also within that, to gather the courage and strength to follow their callings, their most mysterious callings, in the While Becoming Sanctuary, which is an online membership space. So we journey through the wheel of the year together. And right now, at the time of this recording, the annual subscription portal's open. So there's a deal there to join for a year. But I think more importantly, just, yeah, to journey through the full wheel of the year, because it is a template for initiation, for alchemy, right? Through each season is a beautiful thing. And so that portal opens here. You can join from Bealtaine to Bealtaine, or you can join from Samhain to Samhain. Samhain being a time when we're really working with death and the dying of things and our fear of death and dying. But Bealtaine I often think of as a time of facing our fear of life, our fear of coming all the way alive. And so I just will leave that there. But you can also join monthly, like on a month-to-month basis. Folks can just drop in and out as they wish. And then I also offer the Wild Becoming Immersion, which is a 5-month one-on-one deep dive container for women who are feeling themselves at a very significant threshold of transformation. So that could look like any sort of rite of passage we have words for, like Saturn returns or becoming a mother or the children are leaving or other big change. But often enough, it's something very deep within, a very deep calling to follow one's soul, that there's more to who one is and who one came here to be, and really feeling ready to meet that. And so that's that. And then, of course, I always offer shamanic healing sessions and practice in kind of Irish Scots Celtic tradition that I've been trained and certified in.
Oh, gorgeous. Amanda, what a gift you are, what a gift your work is, what a gift this story has been and continues to be. I know it will be blowing through and flowing through the lives and minds of everyone who is touched by Etain and her journey and the beautiful poetic way in which you've described and offered it to us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And yes, may we all remember that what we seek is seeking us
Mm,
in the best ways. Thank you so much.
you're so Thank you for tuning in to KnotWork Myth and Storytelling. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of mythology and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of mythology and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories throughout this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, over on Substack, where you'll find new writing and conversations each week. You can find out more about my writing, my book, our online writing communities, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach at marissagowdy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people. Music on this show is performed by Beth Sweeney and Billy Hardy.